Hi, my name's Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I have been a faculty member for over 5 years. I wanted to talk to you today about a topic that's deeply affected me, which is dyslexia. I have dyslexia, and maybe you do too, and you're considering pursuing any type of field in academia, but you're nervous, understandably so. I've had a really long journey with my dyslexia all throughout my educational experience, and I thought maybe hearing a little bit about my background could help you. So let's begin with where I am now. I'm a professor in a tenure-track position. That is kind of the highest level of professorship that is available in the United States. So I am at the top of my field, and I have a reading and writing disability. So how can I go from having that type of disability to where I am today? And it really was a long journey for me. I grew up in a very small town in Colorado, and there was only 90 students in my graduating class. We had a single stoplight in my town, and they just didn't test for this type of thing. So I really didn't know I had dyslexia till much later in life, and it really affected my learning trajectory. So in first grade, I was placed in special education. In the United States, this is a kind of a class aside from the other classes that they put students who are having difficulty learning in. So I was placed in special education because I couldn't read. Now, it was kind of more profound than couldn't read. I understood the mechanics of reading, what I was supposed to do. I just couldn't do it. In particular, I really struggled with phonics. That's where you sound out different letters and then you add up all of the sounds to make a word. I truly couldn't do it. And I couldn't understand why my other students in my classes could do it so easily. And so I thought I belonged in special education, and that's where they give you additional support. Now, I was there for a year, and it didn't help me, in part because no one recognized my problem. And then I met a first grade teacher named Mrs. Avery, and she just recognized that I was really smart and that I was having a unique challenge. And she took me aside and gave me special tutoring to help me learn to read. What she was able to identify is that I couldn't sound out the letters and put them together, and instead what she had me do was memorize words. And to support that memorization, she put me in a play where I had to memorize a script, and it had many speaking parts of the play. So that was one of her methods for helping me memorize words, and that's what I've done my entire life. So I, to this day, cannot sound out a word and sort out what it means. I just have to memorize every single word I read. So that creates a lot of challenges for me in reading technical material, because oftentimes there's words that look very similar, but the ordering of the letters is very important, and I can't make heads or tails of those. So all throughout my educational experience, middle school, high school, I was just really slow at reading, and it would take me so much longer to do my homework, and I just wouldn't retain as much as everyone else. So I thought I wasn't smart. That's really was my conclusion, was I just wasn't smart. I wasn't good at school. I tried really hard, but I couldn't retain the material like all my other classmates could. So I never ended up pursuing an undergraduate degree in science, even though I love science so much, because I truly just thought I wasn't smart enough, unfortunately. Then ultimately what I ended up doing was pursuing a career in graphic design, and in that process I decided to go get a master's degree in graphic design. Now at that time I met some scientists in cognitive neuroscience who studied really interesting concepts that related to how visual information in the world affected people, which I was deeply interested in as a graphic designer. So I ended up volunteering in their lab and learning to do science, firsthand. During that process, when I was doing a master's degree in art, they allowed me to take master's classes in other fields, and I took several courses in cognitive neuroscience that I loved. Now, the thing that really surprised me in those courses was that the students who were in their PhD programs taking those classes, they weren't smarter than me. They just had more background and more experience. And I realized that maybe it wasn't that I was dumb. Maybe there was something else going on and I could catch up. So from that experience, I decided to volunteer more in the lab, try to take on more responsibilities, do my own experiments, and I ultimately ended up applying to graduate school in cognitive neuroscience. Now, in the process of applying to graduate schools, there was another major hurdle for my reading ability, and it was the standardized tests at that time. They were called the GRE. I don't think you have to take them anymore. But there's one component of the GRE that tests your writing ability. They give you a prompt and you have, I think 45 minutes, something like that, to write a response to that prompt. Now, that should be fine for most people, but I cannot just write a sentence and have it be correct. There's multiple things that will happen where I'll misspell words, I'll have words in the wrong order, I will miss words that should be there. So when I'm writing a sentence just, normal, without the support of technology, it is almost incomprehensible, which is a real problem. So in that standardized test, I got in the lowest 10th percentile of the country at that time. For the other elements, I scored, reasonably well, but for the writing, it was very, very low, which was terrifying, right? Another piece of evidence that I would not be successful in academia if I cannot do this. But what those tests fail to appreciate is that you can build different resources and tools that can help you with your success along the way. For example, I'm never just writing a paragraph out without the support of technology. I rely very heavily on technology like Word that helps with spelling and grammar. That's what I used initially. Now I use things like Grammarly, which is a large language model that will help you modify and improve your writing. And now I use ChatGPT to help with my writing as well. None of those things are available to you when you do standardized tests, so understandably I scored very, very low. But part of the reason I was able to actually get into graduate school was that I worked very closely with my advisor before I applied, and she knew I was a strong candidate, she knew I was smart, but she also had a sense that I struggled with writing. She didn't know about the reading aspect, but she knew that I struggled with writing. So she was there to help me with that process. And for my application materials, of course, I had those proofread to death by everyone I knew, so those looked quite strong, even though my writing abilities were quite weak. Okay, so I got into graduate school, but then there was a problem of how do I be successful when everyone seems brilliant and well-read and very well equipped to be in that program? I was really, really scared. So what I would do is every single piece of thing that I would send into my advisor, I would have my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, proofread all of that, which takes a long time. But it was absolutely necessary for me because, like I said before, I can't write at all. If you were to ask me to write something on the board, I couldn't do it. I can't write a handwritten note. It would just not make sense. I can get things kind of close where they need to go, but I'm pretty incapable of communicating written without technology. So when I started in the program, I was deathly afraid of anyone finding out that I was dyslexic. I think there's a stigma around having any type of disability, frankly, any type of other type of ability. And certainly for dyslexia, I think that's the case because people think that you're not going to be successful in a field where you have to do a great deal of writing. And I get it. I think that makes sense. So I hid it. I didn't want people to have those negative thoughts about me. And I had those negative thoughts about myself, so I didn't want anyone to know. And what I tried to do is to make sure that everything I sent out was perfect. But that is pretty impossible because you're producing so much content all the time, so much written content. And it came to a head for my first year paper. Now I had been working on different writing material where we were doing drafts back and forth, but I had this paper where I really just had to summarize what I had done that year. And I submitted it to my advisor. I wrote it myself. I put it through, at the time I only had Word. So I put it through Word. I proofread it to the best of my ability. And she sat down with me afterwards and said that this is fully unacceptable quality. And if I'm going to continue to produce things that were that quality of writing, that graduate school wasn't for me. I was mortified. I thought that was it. I'm done. In graduate school, my dreams are over. I just can't do this. So I panicked and I started looking for every type of support that I could to get my writing up to snuff. And at the time, I hadn't been using a text-to-speech reader and dictation. And also shortly afterwards, Grammarly came out as a copy editing tool. So what I started doing is when I would read academic papers, I would highlight the text and have it read that information back to me, and I could follow along. And that really, really helped my retention. And then I started doing the same thing for when I would write. So I would write a paragraph, and then I would use the text-to-speech function to have it read back to me the text. And I learned that I could hear the problem, even if I couldn't see the problem. So it would start to read things incorrectly, and I would stop it and make a correction and have it read it again. and try to hear if I hear the same problem and correct it if it continued. And that really, really helped me. It's a way of kind of taking my eyes out of the equation. I'm really just listening for the content. And that turned out to be very, very successful. Now, after I would do that, I'd copy the information into Grammarly, and that would help me as well find the more subtle errors and modifications that I needed to make. Also during that time, I was taking courses where I had to read a great deal of text. And I found that I could do that. I can really retain the information if I had the text reader reading that information to me and following along. I couldn't read it myself and just retain the information. But once I found that hack, it really changed my life in terms of making me able to read these dense, complicated scientific articles and retain the information in a way I never thought I could before. The other major thing that ended up happening is that my advisor, for better or for worse, I think recognized I had a problem. I, of course, didn't tell her, but she realized that I need lots of rounds of revisions. So what we started doing together is I would send her a paper, go through that whole process I just described, and she would heavily edit the paper and send it back to me. We would do these rounds of revisions. So for basically all of my published papers with her, I think we went through something like 30 to 50 rounds of revisions. And it was mortifying every single time. I would work so hard on making these papers perfect, just painstakingly looking over all of the information to the best of my ability. I'd send it to her and it would come back completely red from all the mistakes I'd make. And I would be so upset every time because I was just embarrassed. I was truly embarrassed that she had to do this for me, that I couldn't see these errors myself. But it really helped me learn. It helped me learn the types of errors that I uniquely make with dyslexia, and I still cannot overcome them, but I can avoid them. So for example, with my text-to-speech reader, there are some words that are different, but it reads the same. So I cannot tell if I'm using one of these three words because the text-to-speech reader reads it all the same. Words like present and precedent, it reads them exactly the same. So I might have one of those that shouldn't be there, for example. And I just fully avoid a whole set of words that I cannot know if they are the right word. It becomes very tricky with names as well. For example, Michael and Michelle, it's the same word to me. I have two colleagues that are Michael and Michelle, and I struggle so much writing emails to them because I don't want to send them the wrong name, the wrong spelling of their name. It's mortifying, and I'm sure I've done it before, but I just have to get over that uncomfortableness. Now, during this process, something that was originally negative that ended up being my superpower, that is part of why I have a job today, is that I learned my limitations. I had all of these colleagues in school who were able to start a paper a few months in advance and publish it. I can't do that. The whole process that I've described to you, that takes months and months. So if I want to publish a paper, I have to start 8 months in advance to get it to the same quality as other people. And I know that. Now, what that has allowed me to do is by the time I'm ready to submit the paper, it is good. It's really good, and it's submitted clean and well thought out. Other people might rush things at the end. I can't do that. I literally cannot do that. So what I found is that it has actually increased my ability to publish things after just a few rounds of revisions and have a higher acceptance rate than other people because I can't rush anything. That's just not in my wheelhouse. So you'll see my citation record really increasing, my publication record increasing. And it's in part because I do have dyslexia and I am not allowed the luxury of doing things quickly at the end. I have to do it over a long period of time. That is something that was a hard lesson to learn, but ended up being my superpower now. And that's something I try to instill in my students too, is to try to spend a longer amount of time to really allow things to be very well developed and mature before you submit them. And that's what dyslexia taught me. Okay, so I'm a professor now. I still have dyslexia. What does that mean for my job? Basically, the only time it really affects me now, after I've established all of these really intense structures to help me be successful in reading and writing, is that I do get embarrassed a lot in professional settings, especially when I'm writing emails quickly to people. I do the whole process of writing the email, putting it into Grammarly, and sometimes putting it through ChatGPT as well to make sure that the spelling errors are fixed, but it doesn't do it perfectly. So I send emails to important people all of the time that have wild misspellings and inaccuracies, and it hurts every time. You never get used to it. It kicks you in the gut every time you think you look stupid in an email. And that happens to me a lot, especially because my husband, who's a great writer, he'll sometimes look over at an email that I sent and I'll hear him go like, and I know he read a word that I misspelled and he doesn't want to tell me because it's already been sent and he doesn't want to make me feel bad because it would. But that's just something I have to deal with. It's just these kind of painful mistakes that still happen to me today. Now, what I do like to do in my classes is, now that I'm in a position of power, now that I'm not afraid that people will definitely judge me, but I'm not afraid I'm not going to get the job. I have the job now. I tell the students that I have dyslexia, and I explain to them there are some things in classes that I will not be able to do because I have dyslexia. I am never writing information on the board. I will not participate in that. If we do have to write information on the board, I ask for a volunteer, and they very generously volunteer to do that for me. I also ask for longer times to respond to emails and just general forgiveness when I have misspellings, because that will obviously be in there. And it also really creates a nice environment where other students share accommodations that they need with me as well. I think that there's specific accommodations that you can kind of register in a class, and the disabilities office has to make sure your accommodation is taken care of. But some are just something where you don't want to register it. It would just be helpful in the class if the professor did something or something was structured in a different way. My classes are more welcoming for that type of discussion because I am in that position as well. So I think it's a very supportive environment when I share that I myself have a profound disability that usually doesn't necessarily require an accommodation, but some extra consideration by the people I'm working with. I also think it's useful to talk about diagnoses. I'm actually not diagnosed. I think it's just very clear how profound my dyslexia is, and I've done some of those self-diagnoses. If you've been through this process, comment down below. I'd be curious to know your experience with diagnoses. What had happened to me is, it was pretty obvious that I had it. I've done some self-tests that I'll link in the description below that I found very, very useful. But what happened is, in my first job as a faculty member, I thought, hey, I'm going to address this. I'm going to go to the student resources and say, I'd love to get tested. I'd love to know the resources available for myself as a professor and students in case someone else comes to me with this issue, and also to help myself. And they said there was no support for students at all at that university, and that students would have to go outside of the university to get diagnosed and to get support. And I said, okay, well, where, do you have contact information? And they said that they don't give out contact information because the people that they would contact are booked 2 years out. And my heart just broke for people. I know what experience I have and how hard that was to go through. So it took a lot as a professor going to attempt to be diagnosed, see if there was help for me. It would be so much harder as a student, and to be told, A, that a university didn't have resources, and there's no hope of getting resources outside of the university in that area. It's pretty crushing. So if you're going through a similar circumstance, I don't have advice, but I'm there with you. And there's lots of other people that probably have similar experiences. If you have advice or thoughts about getting diagnosis or treatments, please comment that down below. I'd love to make some more videos on this and maybe follow up on trying to get diagnosis myself. I'd also like to say that there's certainly treatments that I've heard of. I've never done them myself. So again, if you have more advice, please comment down below. I was going through the educational system many years ago. I'm in my late 30s, and they just didn't have those resources available. And I ended up kind of building all of these structures to support myself. But I'd be really interested to see what's available. So please let me know if you have thoughts about that. I wanted to end by saying that you might not fit the stereotypical idea that you have about a star student or a professor or someone who's very successful academically. But I want to say, don't be the person who excludes yourself from an experience that you're interested in. Don't say you can't if you haven't tried. Don't be the person stopping yourself, okay? Try. So what I found is that really I was the only one holding myself back, and I certainly did have to do a lot to try to build these support structures for myself, but I was able to do it, and it had My dyslexia had no reflection on my intelligence or my abilities. It was simply that I mix up letters and numbers. Okay, so we have technology to help with that. And in another life, I would have been someone who got treatment for that as well. And I want to say there is a place for you in academia. Your unique experiences, your unique perspectives are so vital. And without those, we are not going to be able to progress the world. So we need you. And even if you have a different ability that might make it challenging, that ability is exactly why we need you in academia. I hope this has inspired you to continue your academic journey. It is truly a rewarding life and amazing career if you want to pursue this. If you've made it to this part in the video, thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. I'd love to hear about your personal experiences in the comment, and please do give a like to this video. Let me know if you want more of this type of content in the future. Take care.